From the arrival of unexpected A-list guests to what would later be remembered as one of the greatest speeches in British history, Princess Diana's funeral contained many moments the public never knew about. With only 6 days between Diana's tragic death and her funeral, palace and government officials had very little time to organize the event. The overwhelming public reaction only increased the pressure. There was no space to move as crowds stood tightly packed together, shoulder to shoulder. Plans for royal funerals are usually prepared years, even decades, in advance. According to Town & Country, preparations for Queen Elizabeth II's death began as early as the 1960s when she was still in her 40s. Each royal funeral plan is assigned a specific code name. When Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, died on April 9, 2021, Operation Forth Bridge was activated. Queen Elizabeth II's own plan was codenamed London Bridge, while the plan for her father, George VI, who died in 1952, was called Hyde Park Corner, named after a location near Buckingham Palace. The plan used for Princess Diana's death was known as Tay Bridge, named after a bridge in Dundee, Scotland. This had nothing to do with Diana having a personal connection to Scotland. Her death was so sudden that no specific plan existed for her. Instead, officials adapted a funeral plan that had originally been prepared for Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. At the time, the Queen Mother was still alive and would live another 5 years, passing away at the age of 101. This meant she experienced the unsettling reality of seeing parts of her own funeral arrangements carried out. After Diana's death, Queen Elizabeth II faced criticism for appearing distant toward the beloved princess. Public attention quickly focused on the empty flagpole at Buckingham Palace. Traditionally, the only flag flown there was the royal standard, which represented the monarch. It was displayed only when the Queen was in residence and was never flown at half-mast, as the monarch is considered either present or absent, never partially so. When one monarch dies, the flag immediately transfers to the next to symbolize continuity. When the Queen was not at the palace, the flagpole remained empty. In the days following Diana's death, the Queen was staying at Balmoral Castle in Scotland with her grieving grandsons. However, many members of the public interpreted this as a deliberate slight against Diana. According to the BBC, on the day of the funeral, the Queen broke centuries of tradition to honour her former daughter-in-law. Once she left Buckingham Palace to attend the funeral, the royal standard was lowered and the Union flag was flown at half-mast. She later repeated this symbolic gesture during other periods of national mourning, including after the September 11 attacks in 2001 and the July 7 bombings in London in 2005. For many watching, the most heartbreaking moment of the funeral was seeing Diana's sons, William and Harry, walking behind their mother's coffin. This was the moment people anticipated with deep sadness and dread. The boys were accompanied by their father, then Prince Charles, their uncle Charles, Earl Spencer, and their grandfather, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who joined to provide moral support. Earl Spencer later described the walk as the most horrifying half-hour of my life, adding that it must have been even more painful for William and Harry. He said he was told the brothers had chosen to walk behind the coffin, although he believed Diana herself would not have wanted it. The brothers have since expressed differing views about that decision. In a 2017 BBC documentary, William said it was one of the hardest moments of his life, but explained that balancing duty and family was something they felt compelled to do. Harry previously told Newsweek that he did not believe a child should be asked to walk behind their mother's coffin. However, in the BBC documentary, he later softened his stance, saying he did not see the decision as right or wrong and that he was ultimately glad he had taken part in honouring his mother. As the funeral procession passed Buckingham Palace, the Queen, Princess Margaret, and other members of the royal family stood at the gates to pay their respects. According to Princess Diana's biographer Andrew Morton, the Queen bowed her head deeply as the coffin passed, while Princess Margaret barely acknowledged it. Morton also claimed that moments before the procession arrived, Margaret was discussing renovations to the bathrooms at Kensington Palace, where she and Diana had once lived in neighbouring apartments. This apparent coldness was surprising, given that Margaret and Diana once shared common ground. Margaret understood Diana's troubled relationship with the press, having herself been a frequent target of paparazzi attention in earlier years. However, Margaret's ultimate loyalty was always to the Queen and the institution of the monarchy. When Diana broke an unspoken royal rule by giving a tell-all interview on the BBC's Panorama, Margaret immediately turned against her. Even Diana's death did little to soften her feelings. The royal family also faced the tangible weight of public grief through thousands of condolence messages. Books of condolence were placed at St. James's Palace, where Diana's body was kept in a private chapel before the funeral. People travelled from across Britain, waiting anywhere from 6.5 to 12 hours to write their messages. By September 5, the day before the funeral, the BBC reported that 43 condolence books had already been filled. Additional books were placed in British embassies and consulates worldwide. According to the Sunday Mirror, condolence books from across Britain were eventually sent to Kensington Palace, where they were collected together. Many people also sent messages online. The LA Times reported that the royal family's website received around 60,000 virtual messages, an extraordinary number for the year 1997. After the funeral, CNN reported rumors of tension between the palace and Diana's family, the Spencers, over funeral arrangements. Both sides denied these claims, with Earl Spencer calling them laughable. Still, his eulogy caused discomfort within royal circles. He praised Diana's compassion and generosity while emphasizing that she did not need to be portrayed as a saint to be admired. Near the end of his speech, Earl Spencer openly criticized the media, blaming their relentless pursuit for contributing to Diana's death and describing her as the most hunted person of the modern age. In his closing remarks, he addressed his sister directly, promising that her family would protect her sons and honor her wishes for their upbringing. While affirming respect for their royal heritage, he stressed the importance of allowing William and Harry to experience life beyond the confines of royalty. The crowd gathered outside the Abbey burst into applause as the speech concluded. It has since been regarded as one of the most powerful addresses in British history. Many interpreted it as a pointed criticism of the royal institution, suggesting it had attempted to suppress Diana's lively and independent spirit. Charles later insisted this was never his intention, explaining that he had heard the Queen, when asked about the speech, responded that he had every right to express his feelings. Both Princess Diana's former husband and her former mother-in-law paid quiet tributes through their choice of attire at her funeral. Prince Charles departed from royal tradition by wearing a navy suit instead of the customary black mourning clothes. To some observers, this may have appeared inappropriate. At the time, Charles and Diana had endured a 3-year separation followed by a bitter divorce finalized just a year before her death. However, his decision was actually meant as a personal gesture of respect. According to CBS News, the suit he wore had been one of Diana's favorites. Queen Elizabeth II also honored Diana in her own subtle way. As a monarch expected to remain politically neutral, the Queen was known for expressing sentiment through her wardrobe, particularly her brooches. At Diana's funeral, she wore one of the Victoria bow brooches, diamond-studded pieces commissioned by Queen Victoria. Shortly before her death, Victoria declared these brooches to be crown heirlooms, passed down through queens and queen consorts. Elizabeth had also worn one on the day she surpassed Victoria's reign, and the brooches may symbolize a lineage of British queens, including the Princess of Wales, who never ascended the throne. Around 2,000 guests were invited inside Westminster Abbey for the funeral service. Alongside members of the royal family, attendees included world leaders and prominent figures from across the globe. Although Diana did not receive an official state funeral, many nations sent unofficial representatives. Former First Lady Hillary Clinton attended on behalf of the United States, as did former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. France was represented by the French president's wife, Bernadette Chirac, while Prime Minister Tony Blair and his wife Sherry were also present. Blair delivered a reading during the service, and 4 former prime ministers attended as well. Diana's appeal extended far beyond political circles. Her funeral drew numerous celebrities, including Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and Sir Richard Attenborough, widely known for his role as John Hammond in Jurassic Park. British stars George Michael and Cliff Richard were present, as was renowned opera singer Luciano Pavarotti. Among all the musicians in attendance, Diana's close friend Elton John was chosen to perform. The two had formed a strong bond after meeting at Prince Andrew's 21st birthday party, sharing a love of gossip and a commitment to AIDS awareness charities. Their friendship suffered a serious rift when Diana abruptly withdrew from a charity photo book supporting the AIDS Foundation, sending John a brief and unsatisfying note. They eventually reconciled at the funeral of their mutual friend Gianni Versace. Just 5 weeks later, Diana herself died. At her funeral, Elton John performed a reworked version of his 1973 song Candle in the Wind. Beatles producer George Martin arranged a string quartet accompaniment, while songwriter Bernie Taupin revised the lyrics to honor Diana, replacing references to Marilyn Monroe with lines such as, "Goodbye England's Rose." Nervous about making a mistake, John relied on a teleprompter. According to Reuters, it was the only time he ever performed that version live. Released on September 13, the song became the best-selling single in the UK of all time and the top-selling song of 1997. Globally, it has been surpassed only by Bing Crosby's White Christmas. All proceeds were donated to charities Diana supported. Many elements of Diana's coffin followed royal tradition. During the funeral procession, it was draped in the royal standard, a flag flown over royal residences and parliament when the monarch is present and used for royals without personal standards. Senior royals have their own versions of the flag to reflect their rank. The coffin was also lined with lead, a customary practice among the royal family to aid preservation, adding considerable weight for the pallbearers. Despite these traditions, there were deeply personal touches. Before the coffin was carried through London to Westminster Abbey, Princes William and Harry placed a white floral arrangement on top, accompanied by a handwritten note that simply read, "Mommy." Although Westminster Abbey is the burial place of many prominent royals, including Henry VII, Elizabeth I, and Mary Queen of Scots, Diana was not laid to rest there. According to the BBC, her brother Charles, Earl Spencer, initially planned to bury her in the family vault near their childhood home of Althorpe. He later chose a more private resting place on the estate's grounds to protect her from constant public intrusion. Even so, he revealed in 2017 that there had been 4 attempts to break into her tomb. Following the funeral, Diana's coffin was transported 70 miles from London to the estate, where she was buried in a private ceremony attended only by close family and officiated by a family friend. Her grave lies on a small island in a lake known as the Oval, surrounded by trees planted by her family, including Diana herself and her sons. A statue in a small temple on the shore marks the site. While visitors to the estate are not permitted to access the island, Diana is not alone there. According to the Chicago Tribune, several family pets, including her cat Marmalade, are also buried on the grounds. Though some have criticized this decision, Charles's primary intention was to give William and Harry a peaceful place to grieve their mother, one that remains both private and beautiful.